So multi-stakeholder initiative, when we're talking about that term, and it means lots of different things to different people, but because we're looking at this from a human rights perspective, are these things protecting human rights? We're looking, and we're also lawyers for the most part, we've been looking at those initiatives that are setting standards that address human rights issues. And they're setting those standards and they're governing whether those standards are being followed through a body that has different stakeholders that are involved in the governance of the initiative. Normally civil society and business, sometimes governments, and quite really, frankly, rights holders themselves. And they often tend to have some sort of oversight kind of mechanism alongside them. So when we're talking about MSIs, that's what we're talking about. We've tracked 40 of them in a database that's available off our website. And they range from those that certify consumer products right through to those that are sort of setting good practice around what freedom of expression and privacy might look like on the internet. Are these things working? Let's ask that question from an evidence-based perspective. Are they bringing tangible benefits to rights holders? Are they effectively designed from a human rights perspective? You needed to have important and clear standards that actually address the key human rights issues in an industry. You needed to be able to effectively monitor whether companies were in fact complying with those standards. There needed to be access to remedy. Can in fact rights holders in any way report when there's been violations of their rights and actually receive remedy? That's an important, critical part of the human rights process. And over time, we began to see, as we looked at some MSIs, sort of we would do a deep dive into one or two when we piloted this tool, that there were particular areas where that was missing. And as we began to expand out and say, look, is this a problem of one initiative or is this systemic? We did see that there were some major systemic flaws. And it's a result of seeing the fact that basically across the board, these core essential qualities are lacking when it comes to like looking at how they play out, that has led us to this very strong conclusion. Well, I feel like where we need to go from here is to see, look, systematically, if you're to look at the sort of insights that we've shared, and I'm going to drop them off the screen now, what's really underpinning them is, as you've said, the failure to center rights holders and the failure to actually set up a system that restricts and changes corporate behavior. So if you look at like a lot of the standards that these things are setting up, what they're setting up is a process around which corporations don't really need to fundamentally abide or change. There has never been any obligation to say, once you join, you now must legally commit and obligate everybody to, in fact, so you must now obligate yourself to make changes. Like, there's no legal enforceability, despite the fact that there's been this emergence of other models that have said, if you join our initiative, and we're going to hear from others on this, you will now need to set up a legally enforceable process where where rights holders can say, we're seeing that you're not meeting the standard and we're now holding you to account. So what really needs to happen is, going forward, we need to think about alternatives that address both of these problems. That is, we need to think about setting up systems that center rights holders to design and create and operate and govern. Because if we had had that from the beginning, I suspect we wouldn't have had a third of MSIs not having any remedy or access to remedy at all. You wouldn't have top-down monitoring. You'd have really different systems. So rights holder centrality seems to be key for future human rights interventions.
We go to the fields, we educate the workers, and then the monitoring process takes place right after with the visit from the Fair Food Standards Council. This is the organization that is charged with the task of overseeing implementation and compliance from both growers and corporations that have joined onto the Fair Food program. There's a complaint mechanism that works 24/7, and the monitoring is very, very effective. Because they do 50%, never less than 50% of conversations happening with workers in the fields to basically get the best idea what's going on whenever they're doing the audits. So the auditing is incredible and it has no parallel, period. The protections against retaliation are key in all of this process because workers are now able to speak without fear of retaliation. In the past, you would have to wait with a question as a worker. Do I complain knowing that I'm gonna be fired right away if I'm lucky, or I will become a victim of violence if I'm not? And that was a very real fear. But overall, poverty, you wouldn't risk the food on the table for your kids. So many times you would have to just keep working and keep quiet. Today, that's not the case. The protections that the market offers through the campaign for fair food that pushes these corporations to do the right thing is what makes it possible for workers to have the power in the workplace to bring forward any complaints that will ultimately help to transform the industry, which is what we have been seeing in the past few years, since 2011 until today. 49 supervisors have been disciplined and 19 have been fired for instances of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So all of this is to say that this works. And this was created by workers themselves that have the protections they need to be able to exercise their human rights, and is no longer a dream. This serves as a blueprint for collaborations and working together with other organizations across the United States and across the globe. Here in the US, the first successful replication of what we call the worker-driven social responsibility model, which emerges out of our experiences in the field, has happened, and it's taking place in Vermont with migrant justice in the dairy industry. The construction industry is also applying something that is modeling after the Fair Food Program and the worker-driven social responsibility model. And we have a worker-driven social responsibility network, which is formed by many organizations that are working with us to push the narrative. So this is just great. So more corporations need to come on board first for us to be able to expand these to other places in US agriculture. But the model of worker-driven social responsibility is replicable. And as I was mentioning earlier, it has been successfully implemented in Vermont. There are workers in Minnesota that are implementing it too as a tool in the work around construction. And also in the textile industry in Bangladesh with a court on fire and building safety in Bangladesh. Some of the provisions that we created are being applied in different parts of the globe already. What we need is for people to stand with us and help us create more power that is aiming to empower workers so that they can take the lead in the creation of the models that are adequate for their reality. Stakeholders have and should be the ones that are directing all efforts and are creating the solutions to the problems that are impacting their lives.